Hey, everybody, and welcome to Twice as Lively with Ken Heckenlively. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about turning in my 22nd book. Yes, that's right. This will be my 22nd book. You can see many of my books behind me, but I'm actually running out of space. I'm going to need to figure out what I can do to get more books into the background. Maybe I'm going to have to move my Elon Musk doll or my SpaceX Starliner spaceship, or maybe I'm going to have to move my puppet Jesus because, but I really don't want to move Jesus because, everybody needs a little Jesus in their lives. But what we may need, even as much as we need Jesus, is maybe we need a little bit of coffee. So, as always, I have Pete's Coffee, the most delicious coffee on the planet. Although Inklings is a very close second. But thankfully, Pete's was open. So I got my coffee as it is here, 2:30 in the afternoon in California, where I live. And because it's 2:30 in the afternoon, that means that it is not socially acceptable for my drink to contain alcohol. But if you, in the privacy of your own home, choose to have alcohol in your drink, I will make no judgments about you. Okay, here we go. Are you all ready for that simultaneous sip? Get your beverage of choice. Let's enjoy it all together. Ah, so delicious. That coffee is great. The caffeine is wonderful. Had a good night's sleep. So I'm ready to do the podcast. So you may ask yourself, Kent, 22 books, and you write about a lot of controversial subjects. You write about corruption, whether it's in science, medicine, big tech, or big media. You really cover the waterfront. Aren't you cynical? Aren't you downhearted? Aren't you pessimistic about the world? No, I'm not. And maybe it's because I just believe that there's a job every one of us is supposed to be doing, and we shouldn't complain about it because God decided that's our job. And so all we can do is stop complaining and get to work at the job that God has assigned to you. So apparently, God has assigned me the job of writing books. So this is my new book, Book of Secrets. Congress tries to find the truth about the deep state. And it says, don't you want to know who wins? That was a really nice touch from my publisher, Post Hill Press. As you can see, my name is on it solely other people, but this time it's just me. That's right. Nobody else to share the credit with. A number of interviews with Congressman Eric Burleson for it. And so it really is the story of Congressman Eric Burleson's work on the Task Force on Declassification of Federal Secrets, looking at things like the JFK assassination, the Martin Luther King Jr. assassination, the Epstein files, and UFOs, with a good helping of what really went on during COVID. Now, doesn't that sound like the kind of book that you want to read? I know it does, because so many people are worried or interested in corruption or conspiracies. If you want to be mean about it, I like to call it corruption rather than conspiracy, because we all acknowledge there's a lot of corruption around. And we don't mind there being conspiracies if we're talking about drugs or prostitution rings or, schemes against the government. But for some reason, when we're talking about public figures, conspiracy means a bad thing. So that's why I always use the word corruption, because there is a lot of corruption. Our forefathers who created our wonderful country understood that pretty much all individuals and all institutions will inevitably tend towards corruption unless there is a strong oversight and transparency and truth seeking function. So, as the old saying goes, cockroaches scurry away from the light. So, what I seek to do with all of my books is to bring light onto important issues. And after 22 books, you may think I'm cynical about Congress, and there is a good amount that I'm cynical about Congress. But it seems pretty clear to me that there are some significant figures in Congress who are very interested in getting to the bottom of many controversies that are on people's minds today. And so, what I do with my book is not focus on those people who don't want to answer the questions, but I like to profile those people in Congress that I consider to be modern day heroes, people who are in the mold of our founding fathers, people who are in the mold of crusading figures throughout history, maybe like Upton Sinclair, maybe like Ralph Nader, who are attempting to get to the bottom of many mysteries about our government. And so I think that that is in the spirit of our original founding, which is the founding fathers believed that an educated populace required the truth, which is why the First Amendment to the Constitution was freedom of speech. Because if you don't have the freedom to speak, well, you're not going to be thinking as clearly as you should. And as many have said, well, if somebody wants to shut you up from speaking, maybe that Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, is just as necessary as the first. Now, I'm not going to offer an opinion on whether having guns is just as important as having speech, but they're both pretty darn important, especially if you look at human history and what human beings are likely to do to each other. So, I thought I would talk a little bit about how it is that I, at the age of 63, starting my writing career at the age of 51 with the publication of my first book, have been able to publish 22 books. Well, the first thing that you should know is I just love writing. Now, that may sound really strange, but I remember one of my writing professors saying that there's a lot of people who say they want to have written a book, but there are relatively few people who want to be writers, meaning that they write consistently. I also heard a really interesting statistic when I was starting out, which is something like 60 to 70% of the people who write and publish a book never write another book. And so that made me think, whoa, okay, I see how I can game the system. If I can get one book published, then I can get another one published and I can keep going. This led me to some work by, I believe it was Malcolm Gladwell, and he talked about the question of whether the great artists are creating works that are just better than everybody else, or whether they are creating a lot of works and then they're known for a few. And the answer seems to be that the greatest artists of history, whether that be writers like William Shakespeare, whether that be composers like Mozart, or whether that be artists, it seems that quantity is linked to quality. So Shakespeare is known for 4 or 5 plays. Mozart is known for 4 or 5 of his great compositions. Um, but both Shakespeare and Mozart were among the most prolific artists of their time. I think that Shakespeare has well over 60 plays, and Mozart has, I believe, somewhere over 70 different compositions. So that just was a message to me that I just need to keep writing. Okay. So there's another important point that I think every wannabe writer should consider. And it's this: a book is just a math problem. All right. I'm going to say that again. A book is just a math problem. Why do I say that? Every book that you read is approximately 60,000 to 100,000 words. Okay. So what that means is you just got to break it down like you'd break down a math problem. If you write 1,000 words a day, well, it should take you 60 to 50 days to write that book. If you write 2,000 words a day, which is where I like to be, that means it's going to take you about 30 to 50 days. That's it. 30 to 50 days of your life. And what does that mean to write 2,000 words? Well, I can write 2,000 words in about 2.5 to 3 hours, especially if I've done a little bit of work beforehand, so I know what I'm doing. And then when I get into that writing space, I just go. Okay, so think about that. I have developed a superpower. My superpower is that I can write 2,000 words a day on a regular basis. I've also pushed myself from time to time, especially when I'm up against a deadline, to see what is the most number of words, what's the greatest number of words I can write in a single day. Well, it's somewhere around 5,000. So my limit is about 5,000 words a day. I may have a splitting headache at the end of that day, but I can do it. So that means somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 words a day, especially if I don't have that much else going on, is something I should be able to easily do. When I'm getting started with a book, I'm usually doing about 1,000 to 1,500 words a day. And that's because I may be doing a fair bit of research. I may be interviewing people. I may be reviewing documents, trying to figure out what's necessary. But really, I'm putting in 4 to 6 hours a day in writing. And what that nets me is usually somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 words a day. So all that means is let's just say I'm doing 1,000 words a day, and 3 weeks go by. I've got 21,000 words. And let's just say I take one day off. So it's 20,000 words. Well, I'm pretty well underway with writing that book. And what happens is things start coming to me. And it's one of the things I always tell writers is begin, begin, begin. Work, work, work. Put those words on the page. Will some of them absolutely suck? Yes, they will. But you know how you're going to be different than all the other writers out there? You're going to have words written, and then you can figure out what you need to make those words better. And it's really fun when you put those words down and you review them, because they will start talking to you. You know, they will start saying, oh man, this is really good. Or no, you need to add some things. So I'm starting a new novel in the past couple of days. It will be called This Never Happened, The Secret School. And I'm not quite sure where I'm going, but I'm just putting the work in. I'm just sitting my ass down, writing 1,000 words. I print up things as I need them because it is a fictional story, but it takes place in a certain historical content. And I'm just letting myself go. Now, this is something that's kind of discussed in my writers group, which is, do you have to create everything, or is the writer tapping into something? Is there some flow that's out there? What the ancients called the muses. And I just have to say, I'm more in the muse camp. I don't feel like I'm writing everything on my own. I feel like I'm just opening myself up. I'm setting up a situation. And to some extent, I am letting the characters take me where I need to go. So I write my characters, but it's a little bit like I've heard about having children, which is, if you really want to enjoy being a parent, understand that your children come through you and not from you. And your job is to respect that individuality of them and just assist them on the journey that they're on. And I've always found that to be a really good principle, because none of us likes to feel like we're being controlled by somebody else. What we want to have done is we want our individuality to be respected, and then somebody to give us guidance for our own unique journey. I think that's what writers need to do. I think if you want to write, just set yourself down and say, okay, I'm going to write 1,000 words. Maybe you start out with 500 words. My writing group also makes fun of me because I have this little saying, which is when they ask me, hey, Ken, how is it that you're able to write so much? And I say, well, I imagine that terrorists have taken my family hostage and they will not let them go unless I've written 1,000 words. And it's kind of the joke now. And they, when we sit together and we have an hour writing session and the timer beeps, they all look at me and go, so Ken, is your family safe from the terrorists? And, most times I go, yeah, the family's safe. Or, I got 150 words left till my family gets free. Maybe I'll finish it by lunchtime. No reason to let my family go too early. So, so I give that just to all you aspiring writers out there. Trust yourself, open yourself to the flow, and just do it. I mean, life goes by really quickly. I'm 63 years old. I feel like I'm 22. So just do it. God damn it. Just do it. Sit down. Sit your ass down. Write. Don't get up until you've done 1,000 words, even if you have to pee. Okay. Moving on to politics. I've been talking about this Iran situation, and I feel like a lot of conservative commentators are really missing the boat on what's going on. But I've struggled to find somebody else who does a good job of talking about the Iran situation in the way that I see it. And so that's why I was really excited to see this opinion piece from Newsmax, which says Iran's real fear isn't war, it's surviving peace. And the writer is Hamid Enayat. I know nothing about Hamid except that he is a writer for Newsmax. Apparently, he's fairly well known, but he does a lot of really good things in this piece. And I have to say, Hamid seems to see things the way I do, and so of course that means he's really bright. Okay, so let me read a couple paragraphs from Hamid's op-ed. It says, most governments seek peace to strengthen their power. The Islamic Republic may be one of the few regimes for which peace poses a greater political danger than war. Within days of reaching a new understanding with Washington, Tehran was again at the center of military confrontation in the Persian Gulf. Whether this latest escalation expands or subsides is almost beside the point. The more revealing question is this: can the Islamic Republic actually survive a lasting peace with the United States? This is something that I don't think that most political commentators on the right or left understand. And what you need to understand is that the creation of an external enemy by any regime can be the way that they maintain power. Now, first of all, does Iran have a legitimate beef against the United States? Yes, absolutely. In 1953, we overthrew their democratically elected president and installed the Shah, who reigned until 1979. During that time, his security forces inflicted great suffering on many people, and many human rights abuses were created. So there is historical justification for Iran criticizing the United States and probably also Great Britain. Okay, that was 1953. It is today, 2026. Should Iran be engaged in the kind of actions, slogans, ideologies based on what happened in 1953, or if you want to be even more accurate about it, what happened up until 1979? I would say no, that after 5 or 10 years, most countries, whatever happens, need to move on from that. If any government is holding on to historical grudges rather than trying to create a new future, you should be suspect of that government. This is a point that Hamid makes, and I want to read a couple other sections which really point out why I think Trump is doing a great thing, because what he's doing is he's breaking the legitimacy of the current Iranian regime, a legitimacy which should be broken. So let's go to a couple places here. A government whose domestic legitimacy depends in part on permanent confrontation may continue to generate external crises even while negotiating. The central question, therefore, is not whether peace would benefit the Iranian people. It almost certainly would. The real question is whether the Islamic Republic can politically survive the consequences of genuine peace. That may be the greatest strategic dilemma facing Tehran today. For the Iranian people, peace could create space for political expression, economic recovery, and renewed civic life. For the Islamic Republic, however, genuine peace threatens something far more fundamental: the political architecture on which the regime has relied for more than 4 decades. See, this is the challenge for Iran and the challenge for Trump. Nations, even nations at war, as peace approaches, generally sit down with each other, and the world is greeted by the sight of the two combatants sitting down together and figuring out a solution. Tehran, since 1979, has never wanted to sit down with the United States. All they've wanted to do is chant death to America and death to Israel. This sets up a dynamic where the tyrants of Tehran can continue to justify their power by looking at any domestic political unrest as based on foreign meddling. This is something that needs to break down. Iran is a country of 90 million people who've been ruled by the same people since 1979. The Iranian people have not been at the forefront of what's necessary to be done. Instead, Iran has become a theocratic state, and I believe if the lights go out in Iran, the people if they can be assured that they won't be slaughtered, which seems to have happened at the beginning of this war, they will rise up, they will take control. So watch in the coming weeks and months whether Trump is able to set up direct negotiations with the Persians, with the Iranians. If he is able to get them to act like a normal nation, I believe that revolution will then follow in Iran. Because if the Iranian regime acts as if the United States is somebody who should be dealt with, who needs to be dealt with, and who also wants what's best for the region, the mullahs in Iran will have lost legitimacy. So wait for this game of chicken to take place. That game of chicken is going to be whether there will be photos of the leaders of Iran meeting with Trump or J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio. So here's what Trump is looking for. Trump is looking for that grand picture of Trump with the Iranian mullahs. If Trump can pull off that picture, my prediction is that within 6 months, the Iranian regime will fall. This is what Trump wants to do. Trump wants to shorten the distance between people who are enemies. What did he do during his first term as the Afghan war was winding down? He actually had plans for the Afghan mullahs to meet him in Camp David. It didn't happen because they violated the ceasefire, but that was going to happen. That's Trump's move. That's the move that everybody misses. Trump's whole game is that we're all human beings and we should all be able to sit together and negotiate a deal which works for all of us. That's why you put up with all of Trump's other problems, and I agree there are some other problems. When the man fights, nobody fights like him. Does he fight dirty? Yeah, he does. But he's also the first to walk across the field and offer the hand of friendship. Scott Adams was famous for saying, nobody insults you like Trump, but also nobody compliments you like Trump when you do what he wants. So that's something I think you need to be aware of. All right, my final topic for today, that 4.5-hour interview between Candace Owens and Shawn Ryan, two people who I absolutely love. I will be listening to Shawn Ryan and Candace Owens until the very end of my days, until they no longer have anything to say. However, I kind of feel like I've been in the world of controversy a little while longer than Candace Owens and Shawn Ryan. So here is my memo to Candace Owens. What you need to understand, Candace, is that every organization sucks. Let me say that again. Every organization sucks. I don't care if it's Turning Point USA. I don't care if it's Prager University. I don't care if it's the Republican or Democratic parties. I don't care if it's the Catholic Church. Every organization sucks. Every organization which becomes successful will do stupid things, will exert power in ways that are wrong and will hurt people. I've seen this far too many times, which is that any organization will inevitably do stupid things. And Candace seems like she's having a moment in which she is making this revelation. She is coming to this revelation that the Republican Party sucks. Turning Point USA sucks. She's wondering why so many organizations suck. Here's the quick answer. Every organization sucks. Currently, Candace seems to be enamored of the Catholic Church. Let me tell Candace something. The Catholic Church sucks. You're in the honeymoon phase with the Catholic Church. I am a born Catholic. I went to Catholic schools. I thought I was going to become a Christian brother. I decided that I wanted to have a family. And what did I discover? That the Christian brothers, who I absolutely idolized as a young boy and young man and wanted to be like, what were they capable of doing? They were capable of covering up the abuse, the sexual abuse of my friends. Now, this came as a shock to me when I was probably in my mid to late 20s, and I had the experience of picking up a newspaper, and on the front page of the newspaper was a picture of my junior varsity football team because they were talking about an abuse scandal that happened when I was there. And I'm halfway in the picture. I see I'm right at the end, but the two students who were right next to me were abused by a Christian brother. This just devastated my world because I idolized the Christian brothers who taught me, and I couldn't understand why they had covered up this Christian brother who essentially had his off-site apartment and a dungeon where he slipped drugs to these underage teens and sexually abused them. Remember, every organization sucks. That's just the way it is. Candace, you are going to eventually realize the Catholic Church sucks. They've done a lot of bad things in their history. Does that make the Catholic Church unique? No. Remember my principle. Every organization sucks. Now, I'm not an organization guy. Okay, so maybe this is a little bit easier for me. But even though I'm not an organization guy, I usually get kicked out of organizations because I bring up uncomfortable topics and nobody can tell me why I'm wrong. They just tell me to stop talking about it. So you need to understand, Candace, that pretty much every organization sucks. They're going to do bad things. The question is what you're going to do about it. Now, right now, it appears that Candace and Shawn Ryan are essentially giving up on politics. I think that this is a big mistake. You need to keep pushing political organizations, specifically the Republicans. So I don't want you to stop your criticism of the Republican Party because I think that there are some significant questions, specifically Israeli influence over our electoral process and our government. So I don't want you to shut up. I want you to keep talking, but I also want you to engage because one of the things that tends to happen is that even though organizations suck, that's Ken Heckenlively's rule number one, individuals are often awesome. And so you will occasionally find awesome individuals in organizations that suck. And these individuals, if they are smart, will realize that your criticisms are valid, and they will take steps to meet you halfway or all the way. So at the same time that you need to hold the feet of these organizations to the fire, you also have to be willing to extend a hand and say, let's see if we can work together. I think that both Candace Owens and Shawn Ryan are in the middle of their hero's journey, if you will. That moment where they understand that those who they had once held in high esteem make mistakes and do bad things. So I'm not saying that any of the criticisms of Candace Owens and Shawn Ryan are incorrect. What I'm saying is that don't leave the field of battle. It is far too important. What you need to do is show that you can criticize, but you can also push your team forward. And so, one of I was watching this little clip from one of my favorite HBO miniseries, John Adams. And it was the moment at which John Adams was presented to King George III after the American Revolution had ended. And so King George, apparently being sane at this time, says to John Adams, it's my understanding that you are not a fan of the French. And I thought, oh, that's pretty funny, because John Adams hated the French. And John Adams kind of chuckles and he says, well, yes, that's true. But I think that any citizen should be a supporter of their own country rather than worrying about other countries. And the King of England accepts that, and they have this nice little conversation. So think about that. John Adams was one of the leaders of the revolution, one of the first people to call for a break from the British Empire, but yet when hostilities were ended, he was one of the first calling for peace. So to Candace Owens and to Shawn Ryan, please do not understand this as a call to mute any of your criticisms. I want your criticisms to continue. I watch everything you say very carefully. I find myself in agreement with most of it. But I am asking you, I am begging you, please stay involved in the political process, because the real bad guys are staying involved in the political process. So to all of you, happy birthday, America, 250 years. We're in our 250th year. Let's make it a great one. Let's make it another great 250 years. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.